everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brittany of BrittanyJJones.com, and in today's video we're going to be sewing Simplicity 8700. I'm super excited about this project. I love the way my jacket came out. I used a Cargo Twill from TÉLIO fabrics. This video is part of our September collaboration. I did the long jacket. I did both of the pockets at the top and at the bottom. I also did an inside casing, meaning that I have the casing strip on the inside instead of on the outside with the tie, and I just feeded elastic through that. But you'll see more of that in the video. I'm gonna have the long sleeve with the sleeve band. So, and I didn't do any tabs on mine, so I just wanted to kind of let you know what I have on my jacket and what I don't. I also don't have the back. It's like a back pocket or the ruffle. I don't have that on mine, but I love the way my jacket turned out, so I really do hope that you all will join me for it. I will be honest though, everything came together really easy, except for when it was time to kind of tack down my facing. I was a little bit confused. The pattern kind of had me like, what? That don't match up that way. But you know what, it's tacked down, it looks clean, so yeah. You all will see what I'm talking about when we get to that step. So once you have all your fabric cut out, all your marking notched, let's get started with this video. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add stay stitching around the neckline of our two front pieces and along the neckline of our yoke piece. So go ahead and look at your diagram. You can see the direction of the arrows they have, and let's go ahead and do our stay stitching right now. And stay stitching is done at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once you have your stay stitching complete on all three of these pieces, then you want to go ahead and grab your pocket pieces. I'm going to work on my pockets at the same time because they're basically the same exact steps. So piece 11 and piece 15, that is if you're going to be using these are optional. You don't have to put these on your jacket, but I'm going to do the upper pocket and the lower pocket. So I'm going to put these to the side. So the first thing that you want to do, and this is the wrong side of my fabric, this is the right side. So on the wrong side, you want to fold back 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once you have that folded back and pressed, then you would bring that all down along the fold line. I have my fold line snipped at the side, so I know exactly where it is. So I'm going to take this to my ironing board and press everything out. So again, fold back 1/4 inch and then fold it down along your fold line. I'm going to do that for all 4 of my pocket pieces. Okay, so I have my pockets all pressed, and so now I'm going to take it to the machine and I'm going to stitch all the way along the seam line, all the way around my pocket piece. So all the way along the seam line, I'm going to go ahead and stitch it in place, and then we'll come back, we'll do a little bit of trimming, we'll flip everything right side out, and then we'll do top stitching. So for now, let's go ahead and stitch along the seam line of all of our pocket pieces. Okay, so at 5/8 inch seam allowance, I'm going to stitch all the way around the pocket. Okay, so after you have your pocket pieces sewn all the way around along the seam line, we're going to do a little bit of trimming. Just going to trim this down up here at the top to 1/4 inch to eliminate some of the bulk. And from here, now we can go ahead and flip it right side out. I'm going to use my little point turner here. If you have a point turner, just gently poke it out. You don't want to be too rough with it. And once you have your corners poked out into your liking, go ahead and take it to your ironing board, press everything down nice and flat, and then press everything along the seam line so everything just kind of goes in neatly, and then give everything a really good press. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, from here, once you have your pocket nice and pressed, now you're going to take it to the machine and you're going to top stitch right along this fold line right here. So you're going to be top stitching right along right here. Go ahead and take it to the machine and do that for all 4 of your pockets. All right, all my pockets are done. Now I can go ahead and place them onto the right side of my front piece. So I have my markings here. I'm just going to line up my upper pockets like so, and then I'm just going to pin all the way around. Now I'm going to take it to my machine. I'm going to stitch really close to the sides and the lower edge of the pocket. Go ahead and pin these pockets to this front piece and then sew them the same way. Okay, so once you have your pocket sewn in place, now I'm gonna go ahead and set this to the side. I'm not doing a pocket flap, but if you are, you wanna go ahead and do that now. And then once you're done, you can set your front pieces to the side and then go ahead and grab your back pieces, I'm sorry. Use my yoke that I stay stitched. And you're supposed to cut out one for fabric and one for lining. I'm using a self lining. So I have one for fabric, one for lining there. And then for my back piece, I have that here. Now, if you're gonna do the back patch pocket, you wanna go ahead and do that now before we do the yoke pieces. So go ahead and go to the back patch pocket section in your pattern, and then you can go ahead and do that. Okay, so right here I have my back piece, and this is the right side facing up. And this right here is my yoke piece, and this is right sides together. So right sides together, a yoke and the back piece. Now this is the back of the yoke. This one's going to be my lining, and this one we're going to pin to the inside of the back piece. So just making sure mine is a little bit, you know, I have the same fabric, but if you're using a different lining piece, we're going to pin the lining piece next to this side. So go ahead and grab your lining, and you want that one to be right side to the wrong side. So this is the wrong side of my fabric, and I have the right side of it to the wrong side of my jacket. Okay, so when you lift it up, this would be the right side, but this would be the inside, so this would be wrong. I should probably label this for y'all. I'm so sorry, but wrong side to right side on the inside. So again, this is my lining piece, and I'm gonna pin this in place, match up those notches. I'm pinning through all layers, so you should have both of your yoke pieces on right now. So again, now you can see this right here is my fabric yoke. This right here is my lining yoke. This one is on the inside, the lining yoke. The fabric yoke is right sides facing to the outside of the back piece. So I'm gonna take it to the machine, and we're gonna stitch through all layers. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so once you have your seam sewn, go ahead and trim it down a little bit. And now I'm gonna take it to my ironing board. I want to press my yokes, both of them up. So I'm gonna go ahead and press mine, and then we'll come back and go to the next step. All right, so now I have everything pressed out. And what we're gonna do now, I have my, everything is right side facing up. So this is the inside right here. I am going to drop that lining yoke up under it. So I only have this outside yoke here, the lining yoke, I just push back to the back. I'm gonna take my front two pieces, and we're gonna match them up at the shoulder seams, and then we're gonna sew them in place. So right sides together, go ahead and grab your pins, find your notches, and pin in place, making sure you're only pinning your fabric yoke, not your lining yoke. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and take it to the machine and stitch in a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now I have my shoulder seam sewn right here, and to finish this, to connect the yoke lining to the shoulder seam, I'm gonna do the burrito method. So I'm gonna turn everything to the inside. So this right here is the inside of my jacket. Only thing up here is the yoke lining, and I'm just gonna begin rolling up my jacket until I get to the shoulder seams. Once the shoulder seams are, I'm going to put that together, still matching up the notches, pin in place. Make sure that you do not pin your jacket. Okay, now go ahead and stitch them together, and I'm just gonna follow along with the previous 5/8 of an inch stitch that I have already, but just be sure that you're not sewing any of your jacket. So just go in there and just make sure everything is out the way. Ouch. I'm trying to make sure everything's out of the way. I feel like the fabric's really close up here. Thanks, up. Okay. Okay, once you have your seam sewn, go ahead and trim it down, and then you want to gently pull your jacket right side out, and then give everything a really good press. So let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, once you have your yoke and everything pressed, I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to do some basting stitches just to hold the yoke pieces together. So I'm going to baste right around the neckline, and then I'm also going to baste right here along the side. So I'm going to go to the machine and do some basting stitching now. Okay, once you have the basting stitch done around the yoke pieces, the instructions don't say to sew the side seams together, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because the next step is to start working on the sleeves. So I'm going to put right sides facing. I'm going to find my notches, and I'm going to go ahead and sew, pin my side seams together now. Okay, once you have them pinned, go ahead and take it to the sewing machine and stitch down both of your side seams now. Okay, so once you have the side seams sewn, you want to go ahead and give them a press. And I'm going to sit this to the side because now we can start working on our sleeve. So go ahead and grab your sleeve pieces. And for the sleeves, we are going to take right sides together. Make sure you line up your notches. And right sides facing, go ahead and pin. Also, before you do the sleeves and install them, if you are going to do the tabs, you need to do those now. I'm not doing tabs on mine, so I'm going forward with the sleeve. However, if you are doing tabs, you need to cut out piece 16 and go ahead and do your tabs now and attach them to your jacket. Okay, so now I'm going to take it to the machine. I'm going to stitch down my sleeve seam at a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, once you have your sleeve sewn, next we're going to go ahead and install it into our jacket. So go ahead and grab your jacket and match up your sleeves. Look at your notches. The 2 notches go to the back, the single notch go to the front. Line up your seam, pin there, and then pin at your notches next. Once you have your sleeves pinned in place, go ahead and take it to the machine and sew them in, and then go ahead and finish off your seam allowance. Okay, so once you have your sleeves sewn in place, your jacket should start to look a little bit like this. Now, if you're not going to use the sleeve band, then you can go ahead and hem this sleeve. I am going to be using the sleeve band piece number 7. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that. And I'm going to put right sides together. Then I'm going to pin the notches together here on the side. Now I'm going to take it to my machine. I'm going to stitch this side down for both of these sleeve bands. Okay, once you have it sewn, you want to go ahead and open it up and press your seams flat, and then you're going to fold it wrong sides together and just pull your cuff, your sleeve band out like this. Fold it in half. You want to line up your notches and your center seam, and then you want to give that a good press. So I've already done this one the same exact way. So once you have it like this, you want to go ahead and baste around this raw edge now. Okay, once you have it basted, both of their sleeve bands basted, you want to go ahead and grab your jacket, and we're going to put them on right sides facing, so you want to have the raw edges even. I'm going to line up my seams first, pin there, and I'm going to line up my notches next. Once you have the sleeve bands pinned, you can go ahead and take it to your machine and stitch around them, and then after I stitch, I'm going to go ahead and take it to my serger and finish off the raw edge. Okay, once you have the sleeve band on, you want to do a 1/4 of an inch stitch right along this fold right here. So I'm going to go ahead and take my sleeve to the machine and then sew a 1/4 of an inch seam, and I have my seam allowance going up the sleeve, not pressing down. So just so you see, I have it pressed up into the sleeve, so I'm just going to sew a 1/4 of an inch stitch right along that cuff, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, once our sleeves are complete and you've done your stitching, then we can go ahead and set the jacket to the side for just a moment. Now we're gonna start working on our collar pieces. One of them should be interfaced and the other one should not be. On the piece that is interfaced, you need to stitch a 5/8 of an inch stitch all the way across the top, and you should have transferred 2 dots. At those 2 dots, you're gonna clip down to them, but do not clip through the stitching. And then you're gonna press down 5/8 of an inch, and then you're gonna trim that down to 3/8 of an inch. So let's repeat that again. On your interface collar piece, you want to stitch 5/8 of an inch all the way across. Then you're gonna clip down to your dots, being careful not to clip through your stitching. Press that down, that 5/8 of an inch seam, and then trim it down to 3/8 of an inch. So go ahead and do that now. And now I'm gonna take right sides to right sides with my other collar piece. I'm gonna line that up. And I'm gonna pin around the edges of it. Okay, from here, once you have it pinned, we're going to stitch all the way along the sides and lower edge, but be sure to leave this notched edge open because we need to flip that out. So again, the sides and the lower edge. Once you have it sewn, then we're going to do understitching as far as you can go. You may not be able to get really close to these corners, but just go as far as you can go with your understitching. So let's go ahead and do all of that now. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and trim off my corners and take away a lot of this bulk, and then I'm gonna go back and do my understitching. I'm gonna trim first and then go back for the understitching. Okay, so once you have your collar piece done, it should look a little something like this. I decided to do edge stitching all the way around my collar piece, so mine is stitched all the way around. So now we can move on to the next step. You want to go ahead and grab your jacket, and if you are following along with your pattern, we are over in step 5 under collar and facing. So we're going to baste our collar in 2 different places. So first, you want to go ahead and line up your notches and pin there. So let's go ahead and pin our collar in place first, matching up our notches. Make sure that we keep this out of the way. Okay, so here you can see that I have pinned my collar in place. So first we're going to baste from these small dots to the end, and then we're gonna do a full baste all the way across. So first you're gonna baste from your dots to the end, and then you're gonna baste in one single long stitch going all the way across, but make sure you leave this opening free. All right, once you have your collar basted on, it should look a little something like this. You should have basted from the small dots to the ends and then all the way across. So it should be still open here and everything should be basted together. So now we can set that to the side for a moment, and then you want to go ahead and grab your facing pieces. So you should have cut out 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. This is piece number 5. You can take it to your ironing board and go ahead and fuse the interfacing to your fabric on the wrong side, following the manufacturer's instructions. So let's go ahead and do that now. Right now I am currently stitching under the finished edge of my facing. So first I serged it and then I pressed under 1/4 of an inch of it. So basically I just pressed under the serging stitch, and now I'm just stitching 1/4 of an inch on top. If you have bias tape and you want to use that, that would be awesome. You could also just serge it and leave it out, but because this will be seen, like when I take my jacket off, I really don't want the serger thread to be seen, so I'm just going to fold that under and stitch it down on a 1/4 of an inch stitch. Okay, now I have my facing pieces finished, and so what I did was I applied the interfacing, then I did stay stitching around the neck edge of it, and then I took it to my serger to finish off the unnotched edge of the facing, and then I folded in and pressed down that facing, that serger stitch, and then I just stitched in a 1/4 of an inch seam all the way down the side and then up the top of the facing piece. So again, interfaced, stay stitched. I did a serger on the unnotched edge of the facing, folded in that serger and stitched it down at 1/4 of an inch on the side and at the top. So now we can move on to attaching our facing to our jacket. So we're gonna go right sides facing, and we can go ahead and snip into the side. But before I do that, I just wanna go ahead and pin it here first. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to snip into there. But let's go ahead and pin it. We're gonna match up our notches here on the front and then pin our facing in place. Okay, so once you have your facing pinned, it should look like this. The facing should indeed cover the collar. It should meet right up here at those small dots where we clipped that. So that's where your collar should meet. This should still be open and not pinned to anything. And you definitely need to clip into the facing around the neck. Don't clip through your stay stitch, but just clip to it, because you're gonna need to spread it so you can get it to fit. Pin all the way down to the hem, and then we can take it to the sewing machine and sew it now. Okay, once you have your facing sewn, I am gonna go ahead and do my understitching first, and then I will come back and finish off the hem of this. And to finish off the hem, you're just going to stitch right across here to the facing, 1 1/4 inches. So 1 1/4 inches up from the hem, you're gonna stitch right across, and then you're just gonna trim off a little bit of that. Take a look at diagram 8 under collar and facing, and then you will see exactly what I'm talking about. So applying the facings, after you have it sewn, I'm gonna do my understitching first, all the way around the facing, and then I'm going to stitch 1 1/4 inches of a hem up right here, only on the facing, and then I'm gonna trim this part. So I'm gonna do that now. Okay, once you have the hem sewn, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and trim this off. And I'm gonna go ahead and trim off the top first. Then I'm gonna come a little bit in front of that and trim off the rest. So now your facing should look like this. Now we can flip everything to the inside. I'm gonna do my corner a little bit and go ahead and turn everything right side out and give everything a good press. Okay, before I close up this neckline portion here on the collar, I'm gonna go ahead and do my hem. So I turned up my hem allowance that I'm gonna use, and I'm just gonna go ahead and stitch all the way across my hem now. Okay, so once you have your hem sewn and you are good with that, it says on step 13 to go ahead and stitch 1 inch away from the front edges. So I'm gonna hold off on doing that until after I do my casing. Now, I forgot to cut a piece of the same fabric for my casing. So I am going to do like a casing on the inside, and I'm gonna slip some elastic through it, and I'm gonna hide the elastic under the facing. So that's why I'm gonna wait to do that inch stitch. That way I can catch that elastic in there, and the inside of my jacket would just kind of cinch up around the waist instead of being on the outside. If I had fabric, I would do it on the outside, but I don't. So I'm gonna use some bias tape, and I'm just gonna stitch it on both sides on the inside along my stitching casing line. Then I'm gonna insert some elastic. My waist measurement, I may take off 1 or 2 inches, and then I'm going to take it over to the side and then catch it and stitch it down when I stitch my 1 inch away from the front facing. I'll show that as I go. But right now we can go ahead and finish off our neckline here. Okay, so looking at this, I think I have a problem. Maybe, I don't think I did this wrong, but I definitely think I need to clip into here because my facing won't go up. It won't go up in there. See, it's all facing down with the facing, and I need this portion to go up so I can cover it and I can sew it down. So I'm going to clip right here along this finished, right here where those small dots are. I'm just gonna clip there. So now my facing goes, my seam allowance goes up in there. And then my facing, it'll be covered. It's supposed to slip stitch the facing down to the shoulder seam, but my facing is far past the shoulder seam. So I don't know, I'm kind of lost right now, y'all. If you're following along, you could take a look at step 11. That's where I am. And so for me, it kind of looks like it just has a random it looks a little random right now. I'm not following, but it says to put it along the seam on the shoulder seam of facing. So I'm supposed to pull it all the way over there? That's crazy to me. I'll have to figure that out. I don't know what I'm gonna do with that, but for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and pin this down right here, and then we're gonna run a stitch right along that folded edge. I'm gonna pin on the outside though, so I can kind of stitch right in the ditch on the back. So I'm gonna do that now. Okay, y'all, so I did go ahead and I stitched down the opening right here. I'm gonna go ahead and give my collar a really good press and clean up some of these loose threads and whatnot. And then that brings us back to this facing part that's just utterly annoying me. I can't even front, I'm so annoyed by it. So I'm gonna skip that right now, but I'll come back to it. Right now I'm gonna move on to doing my casing, and you should have transferred your casing line. Like I said, for my casing, I'm just gonna use some bias tape. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my bias tape and then pin the casing on now. So down here, I'm gonna get ready to do my casing, and I have just pinned some leftover fabric that I had along the casing line, and I'm just gonna sew on both of these sides. Okay, so now I have my casing sewn in on both edges on the inside. So now I'm gonna pin safety pin to the end of the elastic. I'm just gonna sift it all the way through. Okay, y'all, so I have my elastic all the way through, and I'm just gonna tack it down on the ends right here inside the casing. Okay, y'all, so I have tacked down the elastic up under the casing. So now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stitch 1 inch away from this front opening. So 1 inch away, I'm gonna stitch down on both sides of the jacket now. Once you have your 1 inch stitch done from the front openings, the last thing to do is to go ahead and put on your buttons and buttonholes. So go ahead and get your machine manual and see how you need to do that, and go ahead and get those on, and then you are all done with your jacket. When it tells us to tack it down at this shoulder seam right here, you can see that it doesn't fold in like it does in the instructions. We would have to fold it in so that it is at a angle like this, or we would just have to tack it down right here to the shoulder seam. But I realized that I did not like that. So this is what I did over here. You can see here that I took back, opened up this little bit of the collar, and I folded back some of this facing, put that seam allowance inside the collar and stitched it down, so then now it can fold and be right here, and I can just slip stitch it to this seam right here. So I'm gonna slip stitch this one, but I'm gonna show you how I did it on this side, because the facing is a little bit longer than the seam, but we want it to line up and be able to slip stitch to be really neat and nice, a nice finish as possible as we can right here with the facing. So first, go ahead and grab your seam ripper, and I'm just gonna gently begin to take apart the seam here. You can see I have serger thread and everything under here. So I'm just gonna begin taking all these threads out. Okay, so now you can see that I have taken a little bit back off of this facing, and I've opened up this collar seam right here. So it gets a little messy, but I'm gonna try my best to walk through. Once you have this all open, you might have a hole back here in your collar that'll look like this. So to close up this hole, I'm going to take all of the jacket pieces and that yoke part here, this yoke and the jacket, as well as that one part of the collar. I have my interface part of the collar up here, and I have the other part of the collar as well as the yoke from the jacket all in this hand. So what I'm gonna do is first I'm going to clip, put a small clip. You don't want to make anything big. We just want it so that all of this seam allowance can go up into this collar. So I'm just gonna clip just a tad here. And now I'm gonna go and I'm gonna sew all of this together. Okay, so now that you have only this part sewn, these are sewn together, this is open. Now you should be able to push all of that up into the collar all that seam allowance should be able to go up in there. And then we would be able to fold the top of that collar down as well and put that inside of the collar. And I need to snip this part of the collar as well, so then that can fold up easily there. Let me trim off some more of these strings. So now from here, you can see that I've basically just closed the collar back up. Then I would be able to fold the top of this facing, which I may trim some of that down. And then I can just slip stitch right along this shoulder. So all I did was kind of open up a little bit of this collar, and I just pushed up that seam allowance, bringing this back some. And I may trim a little bit more of this off. Just gonna fold some of that back. And then, like I said, I'll be able to slip stitch it down right along the shoulder seam, and it'll be a much better finish than having the facing flopping on the inside. And then now I'm just gonna go ahead and top stitch the rest of this collar closed, making sure I have all of that seam allowance back in there and making sure the back is closed as well. So now I can put a pin in here. And now I'm just gonna pick up off this stitch where I left off before and just bring it over here to make sure that I close this up really nice and neat. And then I will move on to fixing this. Now all that's left to do, you can see here I stitched my collar back down. So now I can fold in this facing, trying to get that seam allowance in here as well. And now I just get a needle and thread and I will tack it down right along this seam so that it has just a better finish on the inside and I don't have anything flopping. So I just wanted to show you all how I decided to finish off my facing. I was already done with my jacket, but having that facing flopping was just bugging me. So this was the way I decided I would fix it, to just open up a little bit of the collar, push the facing back, push that seam allowance into the collar, close the collar back up, and then just fold it under so it lines up with this seam allowance. And now I'm just gonna slip stitch it all closed, and now my jacket is complete. So thank you all so much for joining me for another Sew With Me video. I really do hope that it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, leave them for me below. I'll be more than happy to answer. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe below, and I will see you all in the next video. Blessings, everyone. Bye.